Hey guys, this is Austin. My voice might be gone, but what isn't is the MacBook Air. Why does this still exist in 2017? Surprisingly, Apple released a new version of the MacBook Air this week. It's a pretty minor upgrade, but for a computer that's essentially been around unchanged since 2010, that's not bad. What's interesting about the Air is that this is actually still one of the most popular Macs that Apple sells. So while they have updated most of their other more modern Macs, I think a lot of people look at the Air and say, yeah, that's all I need. Inside, we get the Air itself. Now, to be fair, this design really has not changed since 2010, but it's still a nice looking laptop. So it's all metal and it's maybe not quite as nice as something like some of the newer MacBooks, but this is not an old, terrible piece of hardware at all. One nice thing that hasn't changed is Magsafe. So while there are a lot of advantages to going with USB-C and Thunderbolt, there's something really nice about having a magnetic cable that if you say trip and fall over your cable, and yes, I'm looking at you, Ken. Open up the Air and you should see that it looks very familiar. Now that's not a huge downside. So the keyboard, the trackpad, and especially the build quality does feel good. And especially in 2010, this was pretty solid. But when you're buying a laptop that literally came out today, and it looks exactly the same as something that came out 7 years ago, you've got a problem. The first thing that jumps out to me when using this Air is how bad the screen is. So while some things from 2010 hold up pretty well, that TN panel definitely does not. So it is a 13.3-inch display with a 1440 by 900 resolution. Low, but not the end of the world. However, the color, and especially the viewing angles here, are terrible. I mean, look at this. You can barely see it. If I get it straight, you can kind of see it a little bit, but it's so bad. Like for a $1,000 laptop, this should be a deal breaker. So to put things in perspective, this is the LG Gram. Now I'm gonna be doing a video on this soon, but this is also a $1,000 laptop. And when you look at the screen on this compared to the MacBook Air, it's not even close. Now if Apple wants to keep selling the MacBook Air in 2017, by all means go ahead. There are legitimate advantages to having a MacBook like this still around. But the fact that they have not updated the screen in this many years and it looks this bad is crazy. If this screen was on a $200 laptop, I would complain about it. On a $1,000 laptop, no. To be fair, it's not all bad with the MacBook Air. So this is the new 12-inch MacBook. Now this is kind of a successor to the Air and that is a very small and thin laptop. And when you put it side by side with the Air, you'll see that it is a much, much smaller laptop. It's definitely not perfect though. So this is a USB-C port. While that's a nice thing to have on a laptop, it is the only port on the 12-inch MacBook. Now that can cause some big problems when it comes to using one single port to not only charge the computer, but connect to an external monitor, connect to USB accessories. It all has to happen through this single port. Whereas on the 13-inch Air, that is not a problem. This guy has a mini display port that also doubles as Thunderbolt 2, a full-size USB 3, SD card reader, and on the flip side, you have one more USB 3 port as well as the MagSafe power adapter. So while the MacBook Air is not the perfect laptop, it definitely is not dongle life ready. The Air has seen an update for 2017, but the upgrade is incredibly minor. So it's gone from a 1.6 to a 1.8 GHz Core i5 processor, but it still has the same 8 GB of memory and 128 gigs of SSD storage. What hasn't changed is the actual processors inside. So the Air is still rocking a 5th gen core processor, whereas pretty much all of the MacBooks and most Windows laptops these days are on the 7th gen. It really feels like an upgrade just to say, hey look guys, we can put the 2017 badge on it now. Take a look at performance and the Air has definitely fallen behind. So not only is it slower than the 12-inch MacBook, which has a much lower power Core M3 processor, but it's also much slower than the LG Gram, which is about the same price, but has a much newer Core i5. To be fair, performance is not the be-all end-all for the MacBook Air. One of the other big advantages here is battery life. So with the way that the 13-inch is spec'd with its fairly large battery, you should expect around 14 hours on a charge, which is really solid. The only issue is, other laptops such as the Gram have absolutely caught up to that number. One area where the Air definitely does hold up is with the keyboard and trackpad. So the keyboard itself actually still feels pretty decent. I slightly prefer what you get on the newer MacBooks, but I do think a lot of people like the extra key travel, and the trackpad is good. So again, it's not quite as new and quite as nice as some of the newer Force Touch trackpads, but I still feel like this is a better trackpad than pretty much any Windows laptop you can buy. When it comes to actually using the Air, it does feel reasonably snappy. So yes, if you look at it compared to something else on a benchmark, it's not going to be as fast. But for more basic usage like web browsing, which honestly is probably what everyone does on MacBook Airs anyway, it does feel pretty good. The screen definitely does let it down, but besides that, it's a pretty solid machine. The value proposition with the MacBook Air is a little bit weird. So on one hand, it's $300 cheaper than any other MacBook that you can pick up. On the other, it hasn't really been thoroughly updated in quite a few years. It also only comes with a 128GB SSD in the base configuration. Now if this is just your Facebook machine, then sure, that can work out. But other than that, once you start upgrading it, it just doesn't make any sense. The MacBook Air was a really impressive laptop when it came out in 2010. However, if you're buying a new laptop in 2017, it just doesn't make sense. So what do you guys think about the MacBook Air? Let me know in the comments below and I will catch you in the next one.